Welcome back to New York Tech Day. This is Anil Sharma with Nasdaq Private Market. I'm here with Andra, founder and CEO of Spare. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about what Spare does.
Sure. So Spare is a smartphone app that essentially allows New Yorkers to automatically round up their bill when they're at a bar or restaurant to support local hunger relief efforts, food banks specifically. So basically the idea is, you're going out, you're treating yourself, and you're able to simply round up 99 cents or less and help feed someone in need in your own city. Beyond that, we really like to thank the people that are giving back and taking the time to participate. So we have partnerships with venues throughout the city where you'll actually get free drinks for giving back. So it's a full service.
Wow. So free drinks and charity. It seems obvious when you say it out loud, but how did you come up with this idea?
Well, my personal background is in economics. So, I studied economics undergrad and for a master's, and I also bartended for about 7 years through that whole experience. And, it became apparent to me how much money was flowing through the hospitality industry, and I sort of just wanted to find a way to capture that. And I was inspired by Chase's roundup into your savings account, and I thought no one is going to care. People are used to tipping. It's less than the tip. You're already in that mindset. You're already out. It's not going to affect anyone's lifestyle. And then I realized that it really aggregates beautifully. So our goal is actually to close the meal gap in New York. So I could tell you more about that.
Okay. Well, so tell us a little bit about how you took it from an idea to actually building it. What were the steps involved? How long did it take?
So my story is a little bit crazy in the sense that I started the company when I had a 2-month-old son. So the first year was probably a little slower than intended. But I have to say it did kind of help to have a cute baby to take around on meetings. But yeah, so I just started really simply. I had been a financial advisor. I quit my job. I went back to bartending so that I was able to allocate, my days to building the business. Just surrounded myself by people that had already built businesses in the past, took their advice, took it one step at a time, and just kept at it. I had a rule to do one thing every day for the business, which in the beginning was sometimes hard to find, because it's sort of slower traction. Now I laugh because I don't have enough hours in the day to attend to the business. So that one thing a day seems so far away, but that's how you start, I think.
Interesting. And obviously it couldn't have been all triumphs. I'm sure that there were some stepping stones along the way. So what are some of the initial challenges you faced, some of the toughest challenges you faced, and how did you overcome them?
Sure. I mean, I think when I first decided to build an app, I'm a non-technical founder, so I didn't know how to code or do any of that. And, our first iteration of the app didn't function very well, and, we got a ton of press around it. Ellen's blog covered us, Daily News did a half-page spread, and the product just was not where it needed to be for the user experience. So sort of, pacing yourself and aligning with the right people to fill sort of the skill sets that you don't have personally. So I actually ended up deciding I needed a technical co-founder. So I Googled the top 50 people in tech in New York, found an article by that name, stalked as many of them as I could find, and number 4 is now our co-founder, Ramit Chawla. He's the founder of Fueled. So he came on board and essentially, donated services to build the product from scratch, and that was the first major hurdle I think that we overcame.
So you heard it here, folks. If you need a technical co-founder, stalk them on Google. That apparently works. Well, it sounds awesome. So where have you guys grown to now? Where's the business as it stands today?
Sure. So we launched just last September 29th. We've fed nearly 8,000 people through the product so far. So yeah, we've been live just a couple months, signing more and more partner venues and more places to get free drinks, really starting to build some momentum, getting some critical partnerships across a variety of industries, and really trying to get closer to our goal of closing that meal gap.
Well, could you talk a little bit about that? Give us some perspective about what is the hunger gap right now in New York City? How many people are without food?
Right. I mean, it's a lot worse than I thought. So to be honest, I first built this product. I built it for abroad because I thought, people are starving abroad. Then I started to educate myself on what's happening here in the city, and it's equally insane. So these are food bank numbers, but essentially there are 235 million missing meals throughout the 5 boroughs each year. So that's a resource gap, right? That's about a $58 million resource gap. One of the reasons it's so bad is the federal government in the past couple years has cut $13.6 billion off the food assistance program budget. Again, in recent years, really minimizing, benefits that people have. One of the biggest issues I combat when I speak about this is people assume we're raising money for homeless people. Only about 11% of the people that are using these food pantries and services are homeless. The 89% are actually what we call working poor that cannot make do on the minimum wage in the city. So they're just supplementing their income, with a trip to the food pantry here and there. We're trying to close that gap and essentially, close that deficit. So what that looks like, to generate the $58 million we would need to, quote unquote, end hunger in New York, that would involve about 10% of New Yorkers rounding up $6 a month each. So it's really barely anything. And actually what we're seeing is user roundups are about $10 to $15. So now we only need to capture about 5% of New York to fulfill our needs. So.
And how many people are using the app right now?
So we're close to about 7,000 users.
And so what is your plan for growth in the next year or in the coming years?
Sure. We have several strategic partnerships coming out that should put us, well above that initial number. And then once we hit some real traction in New York, we're looking to expand to other cities in the States at first, and then internationally eventually. We've already had some interest from Dominican Republic to try to move out there. Yeah. So that's interesting.
Okay. Talk a little bit more about your experience as a first-time founder. What's something that really surprised you about starting a business?
I think just the sheer perseverance that it takes over time. It's almost like I equate it to having a baby. Like if you knew ahead of time everything that you would go through, you probably wouldn't do it. But truly, it's just such a transformative process, and it takes. I feel like it's a lot of just like being with you and yourself and getting through some really difficult moments. But on the flip side of that, it's also brought me the most adventure, fun, excitement, greatest amount of learning that I've ever had in my life. So I think just the extreme ups and downs that are starting to now even out a little more over time. But I think that to me was the most shocking thing. And then secondarily, just the lesson that I learned was just surround yourself with the right advisors. Like a strong advisory board is the best thing that ever happened to me.
Well, so that brings up a good question. I think a lot of the founders that we talk to say it's kind of difficult to foster a community of advisors and proponents of their business, just because of the sheer number of startups that are out there. So how do you go about finding the right people? Other than Googling top 50 tech CEOs, how do you go about building your network?
Specifically for the advisory network, I think what helped us, and this was a little controversial. I was a New Yorker of the Week back in 2013 on New York One, and that was, we didn't have an app yet. We had a pilot paper campaign that was sort of, we were testing the market out. We didn't have like our branding around us. And a lot of people advised me against going on New York One because it was too early stage. And I didn't listen, and I ended up going. And through that broadcast, we had several people reach out to us to want to join us in an advisory capacity. And 2 of them are still with me today. And this was, how many years ago? 3 years ago now. And I took their introductions from there on out. I think once you reach a certain level of professionalism and success, you just kind of want to stay there. So I really didn't take advisors that weren't CEOs of their own companies and that hadn't built at least one company in the past. So that's sort of how I handpicked, and that ended up working really well.
And how many people are working at Spare right now?
We have about a 5-person team at the moment. 2 developers, myself, designer, business development person, and looking to grow.
How do you think about company culture?
I don't know. I've always tried to make it more of like a friendship. It's just ended up that way. They're your work family, right? And particularly in a startup, I feel like it feels like a family because you're going through so much together. Really, I just like to give people as much freedom as I can. I find that they work best that way. So.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us, Andra. How can we find Spare? How do we download the app?
Yes, so if you go to the iTunes store and just look up Spare, you can find us. Also, our website is www.sparenyc.org. So you can also find us there and get links and find other news as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for joining us.